Welcome to Season 10, Episode 23 of the Ubuntu Podcast. It's Tuesday the 8th of August, and we're going to discuss what's been happening in the news and in the community. I'm Mark, and joining me this week are Alan.
Hello.
And Martin is unfortunately on holiday. What a shame for him. So instead, we have a very special guest with us. It's Dave.
Hello.
Hello, Dave. I should point out this isn't the Dave. This isn't Davey who we've had on the podcast before. This is Dave who presents a different
Davey.
podcast.
You would have said Davey if it was Davey.
Davey.
This is Dave.
Didn't want to confuse people.
Yes.
Hello, Dave.
Hi, Mark.
So where might people have heard you before?
Well, they could have heard me a number of places. Predominantly, I have another podcast. Can I say that? I've got another podcast.
Yes, you can.
I have a music podcast over at the Bugcast.org, and I've been doing that for, I'm probably going to get hit for saying this, for 4 days longer than the Ubuntu podcast has been going.
Wow.
Brilliant. That's serendipity, isn't it? And how many years have you been doing it? And this is the first time we've asked you to be on this.
Coming up for 9.5 years.
Wow. And we've known each other. So I've known Dave since 1980 something.
6.
Yes.
I've already worked it out. Yeah. So 31 years.
Oh my
gosh. I won't
gosh.
tell you what I was doing in 1986.
Were you in the ether somewhere?
Yes, I was yet to be released.
Right.
Still in alpha testing.
So yeah, me and Dave went to school together, and then I heard of Dave doing the Bugcast, which is a Creative Commons music show, and I've listened in a few times, and it's funny, there's parallels in some of the way you do your recording and the way we do our recording and the way you stream your show and the way we used to stream our show. So I think we should probably talk to you in more depth about the Bugcast specifically and how you do all of that stuff in next week's show. How about that? If you're still around, of course.
Well, I'm sure I could find some time, yes.
That would be awesome.
Excellent. Alan, what have you been doing with yourself recently?
I've been adding pixels to my computer.
Gosh, that sounds labour intensive.
Yes, I had to click on buy it now from Amazon and these 2 displays arrived in the post, and I've got them positioned above and either side kind of my laptop. The laptop's on the desk, and then above the laptop to my left and to my right are 2 displays that are on a stand. Right. So it's a bit like battle station kind of setup.
I have a similar kind of setup here. So how many pixels have you got now?
They're only, I say only, they're full HD screens, so they're not high DPI or anything nonsense like that. They're just 1080p.
Sensible choice.
Yes, I wanted it to all just work and not have to faff around with scaling factors and all that kind of nonsense. Yeah. And windows change size as you move them from one panel to another, because the laptop itself is 1080p as well. So I thought that would make life easier. So I did that, and I have found myself so much more productive by doing that, because I'm almost alt tabbing to Windows anymore, because everything's open, spread all over these 3 screens. So when someone mentions me on IRC, I see it out the corner of my eye, and I just move the mouse and type a reply and then carry on with what I was doing. So it's, I'm finding it like really helpful for my workflow, having more displays. I missed it from when I used to have them, and I didn't have them for a long time.
Cool. Well, I think it's time we got on with the show.
Okay. And now it's time for the news. And first up in the news, the internet exploded with rage when it found out that RedHat is abandoning Btrfs. Well, it didn't really explode in a rage. Well, yes, Butter, or Btrfs if you're Martin. Hello, Martin. It's still in Spain.
Or Btrfs.
Or yep. So all of those things. There was a little bit of discussion online about how someone looked at the release notes for Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7.4, which is their latest release. And in that, it talks about how they're deprecating the Btrfs file system. Mm-hmm. And there is a little chicken little, the sky's falling, oh dear, poor old Btrfs, someone else has said it's not good enough. And, but really, and when you compare that with the status in other places, like Btrfs in SUSE, for example, is like a first-class citizen. It's the default install. If you install OpenSUSE, Leap, or Tumbleweed on a machine, you will get Btrfs if you don't coerce it otherwise. Which is interesting that like two very major corporate distros have chosen very different strategies for supported file systems.
Aren't Leap and Tumbleweed the more sort of cutting edge OpenSUSE releases?
Yeah, they are.
As opposed to the enterprise stable. Yeah, exactly.
Right. But I would expect those kind of technology decisions to feed back into SLES.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But maybe they might change their direction as well. It feels to me like SUSE as a company has skills on board to support Btrfs. Otherwise, they wouldn't do this. Like, they wouldn't make that kind of strategic decision for the default file system for all their users. And it's interesting because I have OpenSUSE, Leap, and Tumbleweed both in VMs. And, it's worked perfectly fine until I updated it recently and it blew up. And
is that a file system issue?
Kind of. I ran out of disk space because all these snapshots that it takes of the system state blew up the disk. So I had to go in and manually use the command line like a barbarian and figure out how to delete these snapshots. And I'd never done that before. Right. So it was a bit of a learning exercise. I'm sure someone who's expert in SUSE would probably know this straight away and know the exact commands. But I Googled for a bit and I found some documentation that was on their website. So it's all very well documented.
Oh, good. So you also use Btrfs on some storage arrays, don't you? Or have you moved away from that now?
I used to use them on my HP microservers, but I've actually moved away and I use either XFS or ZFS. I'm using ZFS just to test it out, and I use XFS on the other one. But interesting, there is a device in my house that uses Btrfs by default, and that's my Netgear ReadyNAS.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, I didn't realise this.
I wonder if mine does.
They all do. So it's the default file system as far as I'm aware. And the only way I found out, like, it hides it all behind a web UI where you just see pictures of disks and pictures of volumes and stuff. But I had to SSH into it recently because I wanted to SCP some files. So I wanted to SSH in to make sure I could SCP files to it. And when I SSH'd in, I typed mount to see where all the disks were mounted, and they were Btrfs. I was like, oh, hello. I wasn't expecting to see you here. It was kind of one of those awkward things, when a friend comes around and you think, oh, God, I wasn't expecting you here. Is this good or bad? But it turns out they bought beer and everything was okay. It was like that kind of friend coming around.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was a good thing. So it's not a catastrophe that Red Hat have abandoned Btrfs because it was only a technology preview up till now for RHEL. So it's not the end of the world.
Next up, Marcus Hutchins, the cybersecurity engineer who is credited with stopping the WannaCry cyber attack, which knocked out the National Health Service earlier on this year, has been arrested in the United States, accused of his involvement with Kronos, which is apparently it's a piece of malware that was used to steal banking details from the victim's computers. He was arrested by the FBI for that.
This was after he was attempting to fly home after DEF CON, which is a big security conference that happens in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah. It was all a bit sort of, a bit unexpected and cloak and dagger at the beginning because no one knew. They knew he'd been arrested, but then no one knew what had happened to him, and the local authorities didn't know where he was. And then it was revealed that it was the FBI, but then he hadn't had any visitors, and it still wasn't clear where he was being held. But then they managed to get some more information out, and he's basically going to appear in court at some point. I think I wasn't clear whether he was on bail or whether he'd just been offered bail, however it works in the US. I'm not an expert on the American courts, unfortunately.
It's strange because there's the the conversation online seemed to be somewhat polarized between the how dare they do this to this great man who stopped an epic attack that took out loads of computers in our much loved health service and other organizations around the world, right? It was either that was the opinion, or the opinion was, well, it's not surprising, all those people are like that, and they're probably all like that. You know, they're probably split personality, and on one side they're nice, and on the other side they're, you know, dealing in dodgy stuff with Bitcoin, you know, that kind of thing. It seemed to be you were either one of those two positions online. It was very polarizing.
Yeah, I mean, my initial my sort of knee-jerk reaction was, you know, oh, this is it's another case of sort of someone's going to be disappeared, and you know, we'll never hear from them again. They'll be in some sort of legally dubious detention centre, and then it came out that, you know, the actual details of what they were charging him with, and it actually seems like a fairly normal legal process. So hopefully, justice will be done, whatever that justice is in this case.
Mm.
Yeah, indeed. Although it looks as though the charges for which he's been arrested actually relate to incidents that occurred between 2 and 3 years ago. So it's not like he's, you know, been the savior of the UK's technology hub, and then gone out and done something like this. Yeah. This is historical charges.
Right, and I think that's the thing that I found frustrating, is reading some of the commentary where people were saying, you know, this wonderful thing that he's done, you know, recently, should outweigh any of those transgressions he's done in the past. But, you know, you couldn't possibly argue that if you were the person whose bank account had been emptied, or whose files have been encrypted or deleted, or, you know, whatever. It's somewhat ludicrous to me that people are held up in such high regard that it discounts former crimes that they may have done. Now, obviously, he is innocent until proven guilty, so we don't actually know if he is guilty of these crimes yet, but we'll have to wait and see. And it possibly will take some time for them to form a case against him, and for him to actually be either acquitted or sent down. We shall see.
Yeah. And in other cheery technology-related news, Google has fired an employee named James Damore, who published on an internal message board a paper called Google's Ideological Echo Chamber, which has since been shared in the media as something of an anti-diversity manifesto. So this sort of, it's an interesting read, because it starts off as, you know, a sort of a criticism of Google's approach to diversity, and I mean, I'm not sure if anti-diversity manifesto is an entirely fair term, because it's not actually critical of diversity as such. It's critical of Google's sort of approach to it and their sort of political biases. But unfortunately, while there do seem to be some sort of sensible arguments in it, it also detracts into some sort of bizarre generalizations and weasel wording, basically saying that women are less interested in coding than men because of biological differences.
Right.
Yeah, which, let's just say, wasn't taken too kindly.
Right. And I guess it's difficult, because companies like Google are always trying to improve their diversity score, shall we say, because, you know, it's perceived as the right thing to do, or it's a good thing to do anyway. And having any kind of negative view that goes against that can be seen as, you know, going against the flow. And okay, he went about this completely the wrong way and massively overboard. But should you fire someone for having penned a memo which criticizes the company you work for? Is that sufficient to fire someone?
I don't think it is. I think that is something that companies in this day and age, and particularly a progressive company like Google, that you'd expect them to welcome and encourage that kind of behavior, where people are challenging the way things are done. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think what he said and the way he said it was, you know, top-class stupidity. However, the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression should allow people to make statements like this without fearing their job in the process.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think I would agree with that for a lot of what he said, but there are some specific things he said in there which I just think, as a company, you can't really, especially a company in Google's position, you can't really defend someone saying that kind of thing.
Right, but sure. I mean, in terms
of him saying, this is what, these are Google's positions, and I think it's wrong for Google to, hold these political biases and so on. That's fair enough I don't think someone should be fired for that. But the more general sort of,